Here is a stat that should make you sick to your stomach. 31-84. That is a win-loss record. That belongs to a real general manager in the real NFL who kept his job for 7 full years with that record. 31 wins, 84 losses. And he was not some unknown figure working in the shadows. He was on national television every week as an analyst before he got the job. The owner watched him on TV and said, "Yeah, that is my guy." And what followed was the most destructive GM tenure in the history of professional football. But here is the thing, he is not alone. The NFL is full of general managers who were handed the keys to a franchise and drove it straight off a cliff. Men who traded away superstar players for pennies on the dollar. Men who burned first-round picks on quarterbacks who could not complete a screen pass. Men who had generational talent on their roster and still managed to waste it. And one man on this list wasted the career of the most talented quarterback prospect in 20 years so badly that the quarterback retired at 29 years old because his body literally could not take any more punishment. These are not opinions, these are facts, exposed by win-loss records, draft grades, and roster decisions that are all publicly documented. This channel is growing every week because we deal in facts, not hot takes. If you want honest, research-backed NFL history, hit subscribe. That is all I will ask. Now, let us get into the 10 worst general managers in NFL history. Number 10, Gene Smith, Jacksonville Jaguars. And look, the Jaguars have had plenty of rough stretches, but the Gene Smith era was a special kind of bad. His overall record as GM was approximately 22 wins and 42 losses. That is ugly on its own, but the real damage was in the draft room. In 2011, Smith used the 10th overall pick on Blaine Gabbert out of Missouri, a quarterback who was not ready for the NFL. Everyone watching the tape could see it. Gabbert lasted 2 seasons as a starter in Jacksonville, posting a career passer rating in the low 60s. By the time Smith was fired after the 2012 season, the Jaguars roster was considered one of the least talented in the entire league. Not one of the least talented that year, one of the least talented in years. He left the cupboard completely bare. The next regime had to essentially start from scratch. Gene Smith did not build a roster, he emptied one. Number 9, and this is a rare case of a GM failing spectacularly with 2 different franchises. Trent Baalke. He served as GM of the San Francisco 49ers and later the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the early Baalke years in San Francisco coincided with Jim Harbaugh's tenure, and the team went to a Super Bowl after the 2012 season, so you might think, well, that's not so bad. But here's what happened next. Baalke reportedly clashed with Harbaugh behind the scenes. Harbaugh was let go after the 2014 season, despite a 44-19 record in 4 years. And once Harbaugh left, the truth about Baalke's roster construction was exposed. The 49ers went 5-11 in 2015, then 2-14 in 2016. He had a well-known tendency to draft injured players, essentially gambling on upside over availability. Most of those gambles failed. Baalke was fired, and you would think that would be the end of the story. But in 2021, the Jacksonville Jaguars hired him, and what followed was the Urban Meyer disaster, a 2-11 coaching record and one of the most embarrassing single seasons in recent NFL history. Trent Baalke managed to be at the center of organizational collapse twice. That takes a special kind of talent, just not the kind you want in a GM. Number 8, Ray Farmer, the Cleveland Browns. And this one features something you almost never see in professional football, a GM getting suspended by the league itself. In the 2014 draft, Farmer used 2 first-round picks, the 8th overall selection on cornerback Justin Gilbert, the 22nd overall selection on Johnny Manziel. Gilbert played 2 seasons in Cleveland, recorded 1 interception, and was out of the league by 2016. Manziel, well, you know the Manziel story. Off-field chaos, on-field inconsistency, gone from football within 2 years. 2 first-round picks in the same draft, both complete busts. But Farmer was not done making headlines. During the 2014 season, the NFL discovered that Farmer had been sending text messages to the Browns coaching staff during games, a clear violation of league rules. He was suspended for 4 games by the league office. The GM of the Cleveland Browns was literally suspended for cheating, and their team still couldn't win. The Browns went 10-22 under his watch. Farmer was fired after the 2015 season, and Cleveland continued its painful search for competent leadership.
Number 7. And this is the first of 2 entries from the same franchise, which honestly tells you everything about how broken this organization has been. Vinny Cerrato served as Washington's vice president of football operations from 1999 to 2009. He was not technically the general manager in title, but he functioned as one, making personnel decisions alongside owner Dan Snyder. And the philosophy was consistent. Spend big on aging free agents. Chase names instead of building through the draft. Create headlines instead of creating a competitive roster. Washington under Cerrato consistently overpaid for players past their prime. They traded draft picks for veterans who had nothing left. The roster was a revolving door of expensive disappointments, and the results reflected it. Washington was stuck in a cycle of mediocrity for a decade, never truly contending, never fully rebuilding, just existing in a painful middle ground where the team was too expensive to be this bad and too poorly constructed to be any good. Vinny Cerrato gave Dan Snyder exactly what Snyder wanted: star power. Unfortunately, star power without a plan is just expensive losing. Number 6. Bill O'Brien. Now, O'Brien actually had a respectable coaching tenure with the Houston Texans for several years. The team won division titles, they made the playoffs, he was fine as a coach. And then the Texans made a decision so baffling that it still does not make sense. They gave Bill O'Brien control over personnel. He became the coach and the de facto general manager, and what he did with that power will be studied in business schools as a case study in organizational failure. He traded DeAndre Hopkins. I need you to understand how insane that is. DeAndre Hopkins was a top 3 wide receiver in the entire NFL, 26 years old, in his absolute prime, a player who had never missed a game due to injury. And O'Brien traded him to the Arizona Cardinals for running back David Johnson, who was 30 years old and declining, and a second-round draft pick. That is it. A top 3 receiver in football for a declining running back and a day 2 pick. Hopkins went on to be first-team All-Pro in Arizona in 2020. David Johnson was cut by the Texans a year later. O'Brien also traded Jadeveon Clowney to Seattle for minimal return. By the time the Texans fired him after an 0-4 start in 2020, the roster was gutted. The franchise quarterback situation collapsed, and a team that had been a consistent playoff contender was suddenly one of the worst in football, all because one man was given 2 jobs and was not qualified for either. All right, we are in the top 5 now, and these are not just bad GMs. These are men whose decisions damaged their franchises for 5, 10, and in one case, 30 years. A GM who dismissed analytics and drafted a quarterback the entire league laughed at. A team president whose tenure was so toxic that his own emails exposed the dysfunction. A GM who had Andrew Luck, a once-in-a-generation quarterback, and failed him so badly that Luck walked away from football at 29. An owner who functioned as his own GM for 3 decades and did not win a single playoff game during that entire stretch. And at number 1, the worst general manager in the history of professional sports. And yes, I said professional sports, not just football. Let us keep going. Number 5, Dave Gettleman, the New York Giants. And this tenure can be summarized by one quote. When asked about the growing importance of analytics in the NFL, Gettleman responded by saying he was not a computer folks kind of guy. In an era where every competitive organization in professional sports is using data to make decisions, the general manager of the New York Giants proudly declared that he did not believe in it, and his decisions reflected that. In 2018, Gettleman used the second overall pick on running back Saquon Barkley. Now, Barkley is a tremendous athlete, but using the second overall pick on a running back when your franchise desperately needed a quarterback is the kind of decision that analytics would have screamed against. Josh Allen was selected 5 picks later. Lamar Jackson went in the first round that same year. In 2019, Gettleman drafted Daniel Jones 6th overall. The reaction from Giants fans at the draft was captured on live television. They booed. They were stunned. And over the next 3 seasons, Jones largely proved the skeptics right, struggling with turnovers and inconsistency. Gettleman's record as Giants GM was approximately 19 wins and 46 losses. He was finally let go after the 2021 season, leaving behind a roster with significant cap problems and very little young talent. Dave Gettleman was not a computer folks kind of guy. Unfortunately for the Giants, computers are usually right.
Number 4. Bruce Allen, Washington. And yes, this is the second Washington entry on this list. You could make an argument that this franchise deserves 3. Allen served as team president from 2009 to 2019, and during that decade, he had significant control over football operations. His record was approximately 62 wins, 97 losses, and 1 tie. A full decade of losing. Allen oversaw the massive trade for Robert Griffin III in 2012, sending 3 first-round picks and a second-rounder to the Rams for the right to draft RG3. And when Griffin's career collapsed after his knee injury in the 2012 playoffs, Washington had no first-round picks for 3 consecutive years to help rebuild. The trade was a disaster. But the deeper damage was cultural. During the investigation into John Gruden's emails in 2021, Allen's own correspondence was exposed, revealing a tone and culture inside the organization that was deeply problematic. Allen had been fired in late 2019, but the emails painted a picture of a front office environment where winning football games was secondary to politics, relationships, and self-preservation. Washington did not just lose games under Bruce Allen, it lost its identity. Number 3, and this is the one that genuinely makes me angry. Ryan Grigson, the Indianapolis Colts. In 2012, the Colts had the first overall pick. They selected Andrew Luck, a generational quarterback prospect, maybe the best QB prospect since John Elway, a player with the arm talent, the intelligence, and the work ethic to carry a franchise for 15 years. And Ryan Grigson's job was simple. Build around him. Protect him, give him weapons, give him an offensive line, give him a chance. He did none of those things. Grigson consistently failed to invest in the offensive line. Luck was sacked 41 times in his rookie year. He was hit constantly. He played through injuries because the team had no viable backup plan. And instead of using premium picks on linemen to protect his franchise quarterback, Grigson made moves like trading a first-round pick for Trent Richardson in 2013. Richardson, as we discussed earlier in another video, averaged 3.1 yards per carry with the Colts. A first-round pick for 3.1 yards per carry. Meanwhile, Andrew Luck's body was breaking down. Shoulder injuries, kidney lacerations, concussions. The hits kept coming because the protection never improved. And on August 24, 2019, Andrew Luck stood at a podium and announced his retirement from professional football. He was 29 years old. He was crying. He said he was mentally exhausted from the cycle of injury and recovery. The most talented quarterback of his generation, gone. And while Grigson was fired after the 2016 season, the damage was already done. He had failed to protect the most valuable asset his franchise had, and the football world lost a player who should have played until he was 40. Ryan Grigson did not just fail as a general manager, he wasted a generational talent. That is unforgivable. Number 2, Mike Brown, the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, technically, Mike Brown is the team owner, not the general manager. But for decades, Brown made all significant personnel decisions himself. He was the owner, the GM, and the final word on every football decision in the building. And the results speak a language that cannot be misunderstood. From January of 1991 to January of 2022, the Cincinnati Bengals did not win a single playoff game. 31 years. That is not a drought. That is a generational curse inflicted by one man's unwillingness to spend money and hire qualified people.
Brown was notorious for running the cheapest operation in the NFL. For years, the Bengals did not have a full scouting department. Their training facilities were outdated. They consistently lost star players in free agency because Brown refused to pay market value. While other franchises were investing in analytics departments, sports science, nutritionists, and state-of-the-art practice facilities, the Bengals were operating on a budget that would embarrass a college program. The franchise finally broke through and reached the Super Bowl after the 2021 season, largely because younger voices in the organization, combined with head coach Zach Taylor and quarterback Joe Burrow, dragged the team into the modern era. But that breakthrough came 31 years late. An entire generation of Bengals fans grew up, graduated, got married, and had children of their own without ever seeing their team win a playoff game, because the man at the top valued saving money more than winning football games.
Number 1. Matt Millen, the Detroit Lions, 2001 to 2008. And this is not just the worst GM tenure in NFL history. This is arguably the worst executive tenure in the history of North American professional sports. Let me start with the hiring itself, because that tells you everything. Matt Millen had zero front office experience. None. He had never scouted a player, he had never negotiated a contract, he had never managed a roster or a salary cap. He was a football television analyst, and Lions owner William Clay Ford watched him on TV, liked his personality, and offered him the job. That is how Matt Millen became the general manager of an NFL franchise. And here is what he did with it. In 2003, Millen used the second overall pick on wide receiver Charles Rogers. Bust. In 2004, he used the 7th overall pick on wide receiver Roy Williams. Mediocre production relative to draft position. In 2005, he used the 10th overall pick on wide receiver Mike Williams. Bust. 3 consecutive first-round picks on wide receivers, while the team needed help at virtually every other position. The defense was terrible, the offensive line was terrible, the quarterback situation was a mess, and the general manager kept drafting wide receivers because, by most accounts, it was the only position he felt comfortable evaluating from his years as a broadcaster. Millen's overall record with the Lions was 31 wins and 84 losses. Let me put that in perspective. He won 27% of his games, over 7 years. A coin flip would have produced a better record. And the worst part? He kept getting extensions. William Clay Ford extended Millen's contract multiple times despite the losing. The fans protested. They organized rallies demanding Millen's firing. Signs reading "Fire Millen" became a staple at Ford Field. Local media ran campaigns against him, and still Ford kept him. Millen was finally fired in September of 2008 after an 0-3 start. The Lions went on to finish that season 0-16, the first team in NFL history to lose every game in a 16-game season. Millen was not the coach for that record, but the roster he built, or more accurately, the roster he failed to build, was the reason it happened. 0-16 was not a coaching failure. It was a roster failure, years in the making, constructed by a man who had no business constructing anything. Matt Millen is the answer to a question nobody should ever have to ask. What happens when you hire a television personality to run a professional football team? You get 31-84. You get 3 first-round receivers in a row. You get the first ever 0-16 season, and you get the single most embarrassing executive tenure in the history of professional sports. No debate, no discussion, no close second. Every GM on this list was trusted with the most important job in professional football. Evaluate talent, build a roster, make decisions that determine whether an entire city gets to celebrate on Sundays or suffer through them. And every single one of them failed. Not quietly, spectacularly, with exposed draft busts, lopsided trades, and win-loss records that are publicly available for anyone to verify. So tell me, which GM on this list do you think did the most damage? Which one left you shaking your head? And which terrible GM did I miss? I know there are candidates out there that did not make this cut, and I want to hear your picks. Drop a comment, let us have a real conversation about it. And if this video gave you something real, if the research held up, if the facts checked out, hit subscribe. That is how we keep this going. I will see you in the next one.